The Galactic Assembly. The Galactic Federation's Central Assembly had never heard such laughter. Ambassador Crix's crystalline form vibrated with amusement as he reviewed humanity's cultural database, his translucent body casting rainbow patterns across the polished floor of the Grand Chamber. Dragons breathing fire, vampires that fear sunlight, werewolves that transform under moonlight. Crix's voice echoed through the vast hall where representatives from 200 civilizations had gathered. The humans actually believed these fantasies. No wonder they remained isolated on their little blue world for so long. The other ambassadors joined in the mockery. The Zentari delegate, a being of pure energy contained within a mechanical shell, flickered with what passed for laughter among his kind. Perhaps we should reconsider humanity's provisional membership. A species that cannot distinguish reality from fiction might prove problematic. Ambassador Threx of the Vortanian Empire, whose species resembled giant arachnids, tapped his multiple legs in agreement. Their application lists resilience as their primary contribution to our Federation. Yet they seem to have spent most of their history cowering from shadows and inventing monsters to explain natural phenomena. Captain Elena Rivera stood at the edge of the assembly chamber, her jaw clenched as she listened to the alien delegates mock her species. As the leader of Earth's first diplomatic mission to the Galactic Federation, she had prepared for many challenges, but not for this level of condescension. Beside her, the rest of the human delegation shifted uncomfortably in their formal uniforms. "Permission to address the assembly," Elena said, stepping forward into the central speaking circle. The laughter gradually died down as hundreds of alien eyes, sensors, and other sensory organs focused on her. Crix's form shifted colors, settling on a patronizing shade of blue. "Ah, Captain Rivera, please, enlighten us. Will you be defending your species' belief in, what was it?" "Ah, yes, Bigfoot." Elena straightened her spine and activated the holographic projector built into her uniform. "Distinguished ambassadors, I stand before you not to defend our folklore but to present humanity's achievements. In less than 3 centuries, we progressed from horse-drawn carriages to faster-than-light travel. We cured diseases that once decimated our population. We united a divided world and reached for the stars. Images of human accomplishments floated in the air above her head. The first moon landing, the Mars colonies, the breakthrough in quantum mechanics that led to FTL travel, the moment humans cured aging. Impressive for primitives, Threx admitted, his mandibles clicking. But this rapid advancement only highlights the paradox. How can a species capable of such technological leaps still cling to ancient superstitions? "Perhaps," Elena responded, "carefully, what you call superstition served a different purpose. Throughout our history, stories of monsters and heroes inspired us to face our fears, to push beyond our limitations. Every dragon slain in our myths represented a real challenge overcome." The Zentari delegate pulsed with skepticism. "A charming interpretation, Captain, but hardly scientific. Your own historical records show widespread belief in these creatures. Mass hallucinations, psychological projection. We've seen it in other young species, the inability to accept a purely material universe." Elena opened her mouth to respond, but a commotion at the main entrance interrupted her. The massive doors, designed to accommodate beings of various sizes, burst open with such force that several delegates recoiled in alarm. "With respect," Elena continued, her voice carrying over the growing murmur of confusion, "our ancient records contain consistent accounts across isolated cultures, similar descriptions of beings that defied conventional explanation. Even our most skeptical scientists couldn't explain certain archaeological findings." "Archaeological findings?" Crix interrupted, his form shifting to a deeper shade of blue that indicated interest. "Are you suggesting these myths had some basis in reality?" The human science officer, Dr. James Chen, stepped forward from the delegation. "We've discovered artifacts that predate known human civilization by millions of years. Structures built with techniques we're only now beginning to understand. Genetic markers in our DNA that don't match any terrestrial evolutionary pattern. The assembly fell silent. Even the most dismissive delegates leaned forward, their various sensory organs focused on the humans. "You're claiming," Threx began, his multiple eyes blinking in sequence, "that your myths might be garbled memories of actual events?" "We're saying," Elena replied carefully, "that humanity's history may be more complex than even we understood. Our folklore consistently mentions beings of immense power who walked among us in ancient times, beings who taught us, tested us, and then vanished." A figure stumbled through the still open doors of the assembly chamber. It was a Korvathi messenger, his usually silver skin now dulled to a sickly gray. Green blood seeped from multiple wounds across his elongated body. The assembly erupted in shocked whispers as medical drones immediately swarmed toward the injured being. "Must warn," the Korvathi gasped, his trio of eyes unfocused and rolling. "The old ones. They return. Only the story keepers. Only they know." Ambassador Crix's form flickered with alarm, cycling through colors so rapidly it was hard to look at him directly. "Medical team, this delegate requires immediate attention." But the Korvathi pushed away the medical drones with surprising strength. His gaze fixed on the human delegation, and his expression shifted to something like hope or terror. "The humans, their legends, all true. We mocked. We didn't understand." His body convulsed once, then went limp. The medical drones pronounced him deceased moments later, their scans unable to identify the cause of his injuries. The assembly chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates called for emergency protocols, demanded explanations, and argued about the meaning of the Korvathi's final words. Through it all, Elena noticed one member of her delegation remained unnaturally calm. Ambassador Zara Chen, Earth's cultural attaché, stood motionless at the back of the human group. Her face bore an expression Elena had never seen before, a mixture of ancient sadness and terrible knowledge. As the chaos swirled around them, Zara stepped forward into the speaking circle. "Distinguished delegates," she said, her voice cutting through the noise with unexpected authority. The assembly gradually quieted, drawn by something in her tone that commanded attention. "The Korvathi spoke truly. The time for mockery has passed. The old ones return, and only humanity remembers how to fight them." Crix's form stabilized into a shocked purple. "Ambassador Chen, what are you saying? How could you possibly know what that poor creature meant?" Zara's eyes seemed to age 1,000 years in that moment. "Because I am not just Zara Chen. I am the last survivor of humanity's first war against the darkness you call myth. I have lived among you for 10,000 years, waiting for this day, carrying the memories my species was forced to forget." The assembly fell into stunned silence. Elena stared at her colleague, someone she had worked with for 5 years, and saw a stranger wearing a familiar face. "Impossible," Threx whispered, his legs clicking nervously against the floor. "Humans live barely 2 centuries even with your medical advances." Zara smiled sadly. "Humans as you know them, yes. But we were not always as we are now. We were changed, diminished, our memories locked away for our own protection. The beings you mock in our folklore, they were our allies, our teachers, our guardians against a threat so vast that even remembering it could drive a species mad." The Zentari delegate's energy form fluctuated wildly. "This is absurd. You're asking us to believe that humanity's primitive legends are actually historical records of some cosmic war?" "I'm telling you," Zara replied, her voice growing stronger, "that every vampire, every werewolf, every dragon in our stories was real. They were the forms we took to fight an enemy that consumed entire galaxies. We won, but at such cost that we chose to forget, to become less than we were, to sleep until the universe needed us again." She raised her hand, and the air around it began to shimmer. The assembled delegates gasped as reality itself seemed to bend around her fingers. The Korvathi was a scout. He encountered the vanguard of our ancient enemy. They're coming, and the galaxy's combined fleets won't stop them. Only the old ways can fight the old darkness. Elena found her voice first. "Zara, Ambassador Chen, who are you really?" The woman who had been Zara Chen looked at her with eyes that held the weight of millennia. I am the last of the Watchers, left behind to remember when all others chose to forget. And now, Captain Rivera, I must ask you and all of humanity a terrible question. Are you ready to remember what you really are? The assembly chamber fell silent except for the quiet hum of life support systems. Every delegate, every being present stared at the human who claimed to be something impossible. And in that silence, somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, something ancient and hungry turned its attention toward a small blue world whose children were finally beginning to wake up. Elena felt a strange sensation in her mind, like a door long locked beginning to creak open. Around her, the other human delegates were touching their temples, their faces showing the same expression of dawning recognition, or horror. The dreams, Dr. Chen whispered. The nightmares we all have but never remember clearly. Zara nodded, slowly. Yes. Your minds are beginning to unlock. The genetic blocks are weakening. Soon, you'll remember why humanity really fears the dark. Ambassador Crix's form had shifted to a pale, frightened yellow. If what you say is true, then we've made a terrible mistake. We've mocked the only species that might save us. Perhaps, Zara said, turning to address the full assembly. But mockery born of ignorance can be forgiven. What matters now is whether you're willing to listen, to learn, and to trust in the power of what you dismissed as myth. The questions came in a flood after that, but Zara raised her hand for silence. There will be time for explanations, but first we must prepare. The enemy approaches and humanity must remember its true nature. Captain Rivera, gather your delegation. It's time to return to Earth. We have much work to do. As the human delegation prepared to leave the assembly chamber, Elena caught Crix's shifting form in her peripheral vision. The ambassador, who had laughed so heartily at human folklore, now flickered with the pale colors of fear. Captain Rivera, Crix called out, if your legends are true, if these old ones are really returning, what chance do we have? Elena looked back at Zara, who was already walking toward the exit with the measured steps of someone who had waited millennia for this moment. When she turned back to Crix, Elena felt something stir in her own mind, a memory not quite her own, of battles fought in the space between stars. Ambassador, she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Humanity didn't survive by chance. We survived because we learned to become the monsters that monsters fear. As the human delegation left the assembly chamber, the gathered representatives of 200 civilizations sat in stunned silence. They had come to judge humanity's worthiness to join their federation. Instead, they had discovered that humanity might be their only hope of survival. The legends they had mocked were awakening, and with them, a truth more terrible and wonderful than any myth. The truth unveiled. The return journey to Earth took 3 days through hyperspace, and with each passing hour, Captain Elena Rivera felt the change spreading through her crew. Dreams that had once been dismissed as nightmares now came with crystal clarity. Memories that weren't quite their own flickered at the edges of consciousness. By the time they emerged in Earth orbit, every human aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony understood that they were no longer the same species that had departed. For the Galactic Assembly, Zara Chen, or whatever her true name was, stood on the observation deck as Earth filled the viewports. Her reflection in the reinforced glass seemed to shift and change, showing glimpses of something far older and more powerful than her human form suggested. Tell us everything, Elena said, joining her at the viewport. The rest of the delegation had gathered behind them, their faces showing a mixture of fear and wonder. Zara's gaze remained fixed on the blue planet below. 15 million years ago, humanity ruled a vast empire spanning 12 galaxies. We were not Homo sapiens then. We were something far greater. The architects, some called us, the shapers of reality. We could manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe with thought alone. Dr. James Chen stepped forward, his scientific mind struggling with the implications. That's impossible. The fossil record shows human evolution clearly. We descended from primates, evolved in Africa, A carefully constructed lie, Zara interrupted gently. When we chose to forget, we rewrote our own history, planted false evidence, altered our very genetic structure. We became what you know as modern humans, limited, mortal, safe. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, the mission's security chief, clenched her fists. Safe from what? What could threaten beings with that kind of power? Zara finally turned from the viewport, and her eyes held depths that seemed to go on forever. The Devourers, beings from outside our reality, from the spaces between universes. They feed on consciousness itself, on the spark that makes life aware. Entire civilizations would vanish overnight, their worlds left spinning in space, perfectly intact but utterly empty of thought. The delegation exchanged uneasy glances. Elena voiced what they were all thinking. The old ones the Korvathi mentioned? Yes. We fought them for 1,000,000 years. The creatures in your myths, vampires, werewolves, dragons, they were battle forms we created, weapons of living thought designed to fight entities that existed partially outside normal spacetime. We won eventually, but the cost was astronomical. Entire species allied with us were wiped from existence. Galaxies were rendered lifeless. Zara moved to the center of the observation deck, and the air around her began to ripple. We realized that our very power, our ability to shape reality, was what attracted them. We were like beacons in the cosmic dark. So we made a choice. We would diminish ourselves, lock away our abilities, become something they wouldn't notice. We would sleep until we were needed again. But you remained awake, Elena observed. Why? Every forgetting needs a rememberer. I volunteered to carry the burden of memory, to watch and wait, to know when the time came to awaken our people. That time is now. Dr. Chen's tablet chimed with an incoming message. His face paled as he read it. Captain, observatories across Earth are reporting spatial anomalies at the edge of the solar system. Something is arriving. Zara nodded grimly. They've found us again. Perhaps they never truly left, merely waited in the spaces between spaces. But this time they've made a mistake. What mistake? Sarah asked. They've returned while I still live to awaken humanity's true nature. Zara raised her hands and power crackled between her fingers. The human delegation gasped as their own bodies began to respond, energy they didn't know they possessed stirring to life. Elena felt it first, a burning sensation behind her eyes, followed by a rush of knowledge that threatened to overwhelm her mind. She saw visions of battles fought between stars, of humans wearing forms that defied physics, of victories, won at terrible cost. More than memories, she felt the power itself awakening in her cells. The genetic locks are breaking down, Zara explained, as the delegation struggled with their transforming awareness. Your true heritage is reasserting itself. It will be disorienting at first, but an alarm klaxon cut through her words. The ship's AI announced with mechanical calm. Alert. Massive spatial distortion detected. Unknown vessels emerging from hyperspace. Configuration does not match any known Galactic Federation database. The view screen shifted to show the edge of the solar system. Where empty space had been moments before, tears in reality itself were opening. Through them came ships, if they could be called ships, that hurt to look at directly. They seemed to exist in too many dimensions at once, their geometries impossible, their very presence making space-time scream in protest. The Devourers, Zara whispered. They're here. Elena forced herself to look at the nightmarish fleet, even as her newly awakening senses recoiled from their wrongness. How do we fight something like that? By remembering what we were created to be. Zara's form began to change, her human shape flowing like liquid light. The delegation watched in awe and terror as she transformed into something that matched the ancient legends, a being of living starlight wrapped in shadows, with wings that seemed to stretch across dimensions. The transformation triggered something in the other humans. Elena felt her own body beginning to shift, guided by instincts older than civilization. Around her, the delegation was changing. Dr. Chen's form erupted with scales that gleamed like captured nebulae. Sarah's body elongated and transformed, becoming something lupine but composed of living metal and crackling energy. Each human took on a different form, all of them drawn from the deepest mythologies of Earth. The dragons, the phoenix, the thunderbirds. Zara's voice echoed in their minds rather than their ears. These were not fantasies but racial memories of our battle. Forms. Now remember why we created them. Elena's transformation completed, and she found herself in a form that felt both alien and perfectly natural. A being of crystallized time and folded space, capable of perceiving past and future as easily as the present. Through her new senses, she could see the devourers clearly, and the sight filled her with ancient rage. They were antithetical to life itself. Where reality should have cohesion, they were chaos. Where consciousness should flourish, they were the void. They moved through space not by traveling, but by unmaking the reality between where they were and where they wished to be. "Captain," the ship's communication officer called out, though how Elena knew it was him when he now appeared as a creature of living sound was a mystery. "We're receiving transmissions from Earth. Similar transformations are occurring planet-wide. Military forces are changing." On the view screen, scenes from Earth showed the awakening spreading like wildfire. In New York, a police officer facing a riot suddenly transformed into a giant of stone and thunder. In Tokyo, a teacher protecting her students became a fox spirit wreathed in celestial flame. In London, a grandmother tending her garden morphed into an entity of living wood and ancient wisdom. Humanity was remembering. But the Galactic Federation fleet arriving to investigate, the disturbance was not prepared for what they found. Ambassador Crix's command ship dropped out of hyperspace and immediately began broadcasting on all frequencies. "What in the void's name? Captain Rivera? Is that your vessel?" Elena responded, her voice now carrying harmonics that bypassed mere sound waves. "Ambassador Crix, you wanted to see our myths proven real. Behold." The Federation fleet recoiled as Earth's defensive forces rose to meet the devourers. Where once there would have been conventional ships and weapons, now creatures of legend took to the void. Dragons the size of battleships breathed stellar fire. Phoenix composed of solar plasma reformed from their own ashes after each attack. Beings that resembled angels wielded swords of crystallized gravity. "Impossible!" Threx's voice crackled over the comm. "This defies all known science." "Your science," Zara corrected, her transformed state allowing her to be heard across the entire star system, not ours. "We learned long ago that consciousness shapes reality far more than reality shapes consciousness." The battle began in earnest as the Devourer's impossible fleet engaged Earth's awakened defenders. Where the entity's weapons should have unmade matter itself, humanity's mythological forms proved strangely resistant. A dragon's fire burned through spaces that shouldn't have been able to contain flame. A werewolf's claws tore through geometries that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Elena found herself moving through the battle in ways that defied conventional understanding. As a being of crystallized time, she could see the Devourer's attacks before they launched them. Could be in multiple places along her timeline simultaneously. She wove through their reality-breaking weapons, retaliating with strikes that shattered their existence across past and future. But the enemy adapted quickly. The Devourers began to shift their forms, becoming even more abstract, more antithetical to ordered reality. Federation ships that strayed too close to them simply ceased, not destroyed, but edited out of existence as if they had never been. "Need more support?" Sarah's voice, now a hunting howl that echoed across vacuum, reached the assembled defenders. "They're learning our patterns." Zara's response rippled through space itself. "Then we must go beyond patterns. Humans, remember the final lesson. Remember why we truly feared to use our full power." The words triggered something deeper in Elena's transformed consciousness. A final lock breaking, a ultimate truth revealing itself. She understood now why humanity had chosen to forget, to diminish themselves. Their greatest power wasn't in the forms they took or the energies they commanded. It was in their ability to reshape reality through pure will. "The stories," she whispered, the realization hitting her with the force of a supernova. Our stories don't just remember what was, they create what can be. Across the battlefield, humanity's defenders began to change again, not into predetermined forms from mythology, but into new legends, stories being written in real time. Elena felt herself becoming something that had never existed before, a fusion of myth and possibility, shaped by her will and the collective belief of her species. The devourers faltered. Their nature was to consume what existed, to unmake reality. But how could they destroy something that was being created faster than they could devour it? Humanity wasn't just fighting them with old legends now. They were writing new ones with every passing moment. All Federation forces, Crix's voice, carried awe and terror in equal measure. Maintain distance. We're witnessing something unprecedented. The humans they're rewriting the laws of physics through sheer narrative will. The tide of battle turned. Where the devourers sought to impose entropy and chaos, humanity countered with stories of order and meaning. Each human defender became a living myth, their very existence a denial of the void the entities represented. Dragons that breathed hope instead of fire. Warriors whose swords cut through despair itself. Shields made not of matter but of determination. The devourers began to retreat, their impossible forms wavering as they encountered something even more impossible, a species that could imagine them defeated and make that imagination reality. But Zara's voice carried a warning. They're not defeated, merely driven back. They'll return in 1,000 years or 1,000,000. They always do. Then we'll be ready, Elena replied, her form stabilizing into something that was both human and legend. We know what we are now, we won't forget again. As the last of the Devourer's fleet vanished into the tiers in reality, the assembled Federation fleet watched humanity's transformed defenders with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. These were not the primitive newcomers they had mocked days before. These were beings of mythic power who had chosen to sleep as mortals, only to awaken when the universe needed them most. Ambassador Crix's transmission broke the silence. Captain Rivera, or whatever you now call yourself, the Federation owes humanity an apology, and perhaps a request for protection. Elena's form shifted, becoming more recognizably human, while retaining traces of the cosmic power she had wielded. Around her, Earth's defenders were similarly returning to forms that wouldn't terrify their allies, though the power remained, simmering just beneath the surface. We don't need apologies, Ambassador, she replied. But we do need allies. The Devourers will return, and when they do, the galaxy must stand united. Humanity's myths are awakened, but we'll need all species working together to face what's coming. Zara, now appearing mostly human though her eyes still held depths of eternity, added, "This is why we chose to forget. Not from fear, but from wisdom. Power without connection leads to isolation. Myth without meaning becomes empty legend. We need the Federation's diversity, your different perspectives and approaches. Together we can write new stories powerful enough to hold back the dark." As Earth's transformed defenders returned to their world, the Federation fleet lingered in the solar system. They had come expecting to observe a primitive species struggling with first contact. Instead, they had witnessed the awakening of legends and learned that sometimes the most powerful truths hide behind the mask of myth. In the months that followed, everything changed. Humanity took its place in the Galactic Federation not as newcomers, but as ancient guardians returned from a self-imposed exile. The stories that had been mocked became subjects of intense study. Other species began to examine their own mythologies, wondering what truths might be hidden in their cultural memories. And in the space between stars, where reality grew thin and shadows gathered, the Devourers waited and watched. They had been driven back but not defeated. They would return as they always did. But now they faced something new, a galaxy united not just by technology and politics, but by the shared power of story and myth. Humanity had remembered what it was. The legends had awakened, and the universe would never be the same. Elena stood, on the observation deck of the newly constructed Defense Station Prime, watching Earth turn slowly below. Her reflection in the viewport showed her human form, but she could feel the power coiled within, ready to transform at need. Behind her, representatives from a dozen Federation species worked alongside human personnel, all preparing for the greater war they knew was coming. "Do you think we made the right choice?" she asked Zara, who stood beside her. "Awakening the myths again?" The ancient guardian smiled, and for a moment her true form flickered in the reflection, vast and terrible and beautiful. "Every choice has consequences, Captain. But this time, we face them together. And that, perhaps, is the greatest story of all." Outside in the star-sprinkled darkness, new legends were being written, and humanity, no longer alone, stood ready to defend a galaxy that had learned to believe in the impossible. The old myths were awake. The new ones were just beginning.